Good Saturday afternoon, everybody. It is not afternoon yet, is it? I'm a little jumping the gun. I'm still in the morning. Happy good morning to everyone. This is Eddie Huff. Dave Van Risingham. Oh, yeah, he likes to be called David Van. And I like to keep his mic off until I'm ready to let him in, hog the show. No, but anyway, it's good to be with you on this fine April morning. Boy, that was another storm last night. I guess it only came over probably the eastern side and south. I guess it went across Jinx, and a lot of lightning and thunder too there for a while. At least where I lived, there was.
I'm here with two property and casualty insurance guys. They think about this stuff,
right? Yeah, I know we do. Yeah, oh great, more hail claims. Please, Lord, lightning, thunder, we're good. No hail.
Yeah. No hail. No hail.
Hail is absolutely
it's the worst. Yeah.
The agent's bane.
It's hail on earth.
Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've only probably had 5 in the last, 5 years. One of them being my own roof. But
I had my roof replaced last year.
Did you? Yeah. Same here. Yeah. So, but yeah, it is expensive. I mean, when you get a good hail, Dallas used to be where I used to be a claims adjuster. That was my first job out of college, and climbing roofs and checking roofs. But they would have these cat losses, but they would have literally fist-size hail, this big, and it would just tear up these roofs all across Dallas.
Texas does everything big, Yeah.
But we'll talk insurance another time because I was wondering why our rates are so much higher even than Texas. You knew, I guess, that we're third highest in the country.
Yes.
And
a lot of talk about that at the Capitol. Yeah.
Yeah. Florida and Louisiana are the only two states ahead of us in rates. But I figured it out that we have 4 million people buying insurance actually not even buying. We just have 400 in our population, where Texas has 33 million people. Mm-hmm. And if you have to spread between the 4 or the 32, they spread the risk a lot.
They're different markets.
Right.
Texas is very large geographically. They've got some areas that don't have wind and hail, like San Antonio. There's some areas that they have the wind pool, like along the Gulf, that's insured by the wind pool, not by homeowners. It's just a different market than what we are. And so we have some of our main population centers like Oklahoma City, right in the middle of a huge hail area, and Tulsa's had some hail. Mm-hmm. So it's it's hard to really compare, I think, but also it's good to note that all states have had increases in their insurance rates. It's not like only Oklahoma has. Kansas and Texas have had larger rates than we have the last couple of years. So it's hard to compare, but the rates have gone up. It's another big driver is cost of reconstruction on a house. A house probably costs double now than what it did 5-7 years ago.
That's the biggest factor in rates, too.
I think that's one of them. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a nuanced issue, but one that does hit everybody in the pocketbook, and it's a concern. But the comparison is much harder than I think people realize it on the surface. So,
yeah. By the way, let me introduce our guest today, Mark Tedford of Jenks in the State House of Representatives for Oklahoma, and a good friend. We've been friends now for
a long time,
at least 20-some years.
A long time.
Mark used to run a Bible study. In fact, you may still do it. I don't know. But
I do.
We had a Friday morning Bible study at Panera on Lewis, 71st and Lewis, the Panera. And I was invited to that and went there for quite a while. And so that goes way back. And Mark used to lead this. It was a men's morning breakfast Bible study once a week. And we've known each other since then. And full disclosure, I actually like the guy. Now, he's a good man, and I've been excited to see what all you've done. Mark, let's begin speaking to you, your main experience and background for, I don't know how many years you can tell us about that, but it's been in the insurance business. Yes. And I think your dad had the agency, the original Tedford agency in Jenks, was begun by your dad, and then you took over.
Right.
And so tell
he
us a little bit
started
about
it in 1978. Actually, Shadow Mountain up here, office complex is where I believe his first office was. It was in Tulsa. Didn't move it out to Jinx to 1990. So our family was in Tulsa, then moved to South Tulsa, Jinx Schools, in like 82 or 3. And then he moved the business to Main Street Jinx in 90. And so I started in 94 after I graduated from University of Tulsa. And then he passed away in 2004. And so me and my older brother and younger brother took it over from there. We bought my younger brother out in 09 and my older brother out about 17 and run it since then. So yeah, we've been right there on Main Street. I've been on Main Street since 94, so 32 years.
And still growing.
Yes.
Kind of like Monopoly. Now I think you're in Owasso.
Not Owasso. We have 10 locations on 2 states, Oklahoma and Texas. We're in the Tulsa metro area. We're in Claremore, Broken Arrow, and Jinx.
Okay, Claremore.
And we have a Tulsa office as well. We have a Tulsa location, but it's not very active. It's like one employee there. So, but we do have a Tulsa office.
Okay, I remember you getting the Claremore one probably about 5 years ago. So.
Well, no, we've actually been there a long time. It just we hired new agents there and publicized it. We went for a number of years without really agent that was domicile out of there. So we advertised it when we hired some new guys.
It's kind of like what Daryl Baskin says about real estate. You get the wrong agent. You know what happens?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. Business is dependent on, most businesses are very dependent on the quality of their employees. So that, having the right paid insurance is absolutely the right way. You have to have the right people. Insurance is hard to do. It's a hard industry to be in. And so, having quality people is essential.
I thought for some reason, where did I get the information that you had an office in Owasso? I thought you had expanded to Owasso, but I guess not. I mean,
we've looked at it a couple times. Again, it's dependent on the personnel.
Right.
If we had someone that we were looking at in Owasso, we would consider it, but we haven't done that.
So, and then you've been in the State House now for
since 2022.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So 4 years. And what led you to decide to run for political office?
Right. So I was engaged politically well before I decided to run. So I believe that community leaders need to be, involved in the community, which I have been, also reinvest in the community, but also engage politically. I think that's very important. So I had been active in helping local candidates' campaigns with time and finances. And so Sheila Dills, who was my predecessor in House District 69, was someone that I had helped. And so she decided that she wanted to retire and start a restaurant. And so she called me and said, "Mark, I think you'd be good at this and like it. I think you should consider running." Turned her down at first. And then, I told her, "Give me a couple of days. Let me think about it." And then called her back and said, that I would do it. She was very convincing that I would like it. She was right. I did like it, but, so jumped in at that point, and it's been, a good run for me there. One of the things I'm very sad about running for congressional district number 1 is I really enjoyed my time at the State House and the contacts I made there. At the state level, you see problems that can only be fixed at the federal level. And so, the opportunity when it arose to run for this district, an open seat, with a short time frame, I thought, I can do that job. I'd like to do that job. I think I'd be good at it. And so jumped in.
Very good.
I got a question for you. You'd be replacing Kevin Hearn.
Yes.
Known famously for his McDonald's success and leadership. One of his business partners, another venture, businessman Henry Primo, was telling me that Kevin, and then at that time, private businessman mortgage guy, Kevin Stitt, had formed a specialty insurance company. Because if the McDonald's loses power, what happens to all that meat that rots? They wanted to insure it, and nobody else was doing it. Well, anyway, I asked Kevin about a year and a half after he was in office. I said, "Do you still run that specialty insurance?" He said, "No. Congress made me divest of all of it." And I said, what about Mullen with his, plumbing and all that in home services? He says he spent a 6-figure sum fighting it and lost. He had to, divest. You're putting a lot on the line. Mm-hmm. You and your family have worked hard on the Tedford agency. If you're successful becoming an ex-congressman, you're going to have to reshuffle things, aren't you?
Yeah, that's been a discussion, obviously, internally in the agency. I could say a lot of the employees are kind of concerned on what that means for them. The approach I'm taking is I was already, before all this, talking about what my long-term transition plan would be. That looked like having employees buy me out, that type of thing. I was already kind of on the table. 57, or will be 57 in a couple months. And so it's time to have, those talks. And so, but yeah, that's something I'll have to look at and doing.
So you're obviously very serious about this pursuit.
Correct.
And what's motivating you for that?
What's motivating is I think I can do this job and I would be good at it. And again, there's some things that I think I'd like to work on at the federal level. I've been in politics now 4 years and have kind of have a taste for it, and I think a reputation of being able to get things done. So I want to take that to the federal level. And so I've already, been for the last 4 years, had somewhat of that transition. So, I've, been working there, 4 months a year, at the Capitol. I've lived at the Capitol while sessions going on. So it's not like it's a total foreign, probably less of a transition than Congressman Hearn had initially, because he went from directly to Congress. So I at least had that transition, the step being at the State House. So I have a little bit of an idea kind of how it would work and what it would mean.
So what are some of the items and issues at the federal level that you really are chomping at the bits to be able to have input into?
So the state, administrates federal programs. So this would be SNAP, this would be Medicaid. And so, the dollars come from the federal government. The rules largely come from the federal government, administrated by the state. So the spend and so we saw this with the One Big Beautiful Bill, which changed some of the rules on these, and the spending that goes along with the really non-sustainable spend on some of those projects is something that can only be handled at the federal level. So one thing I don't think people know is that, Medicaid is subsidized, medicine. It's government. And 1 out of 4 Oklahomans are on Medicaid. So Medicaid, as it before expansion, was designed for children and disabled people. And so the most vulnerable of our members of society, those that can't work and obtain insurance for themselves. And so Medicaid expansion now we find ourselves with, 25-year-olds, able-bodied males, on Medicaid. And they could be out working in the economy. This creates a cycle of government dependency. It's expensive. And it kind of creates a cash economy because they don't want to make enough money to push them over the top to, not get the Medicaid. The Medicaid benefits are richer than the private, benefits that most people have. There's no deductible with them. And so there's problems with that. I think Trump was correct to try to unwind some of it with the One Big Beautiful Bill. So we have 80 hours a month work requirements coming January 1, 2027. That will make some change.
No, 80 hours a week.
80 hours a month.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so I think that'll help some. I think we could probably do more. You look at SNAP, which the state, administrates. Our SNAP error rate is about what the average is, 11%, which means 11% of people are getting the wrong benefit amount. Most of the time, that means they're getting more benefit than what they should get. Some states, Alaska had an error rate of 60% at one time. I think they're now down to 25. But this has been abused by the states. Again, I feel like the benefits are very rich. The ACA, Obamacare, which didn't work at all, and this is something I want to work on. We have in the state. 9% of our population is in the ACA.
Mm-hmm.
Before the extended subsidies expired, 97% of that 9% was government subsidized. And so the extended subsidies, would let people get government help up to like 700% of the poverty level. So Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, it wasn't affordable. And the solution that we had at the federal level was to subsidize it, not to fix the costs. Part of the problem with the ACA, one of the features of it is it doesn't allow pre-existing conditions. So, and I don't think that there's an appetite to unwind that, but I think we could have at least a waiting period. I think now that's being abused, in my opinion, that people are buying Obamacare when they have need and then dropping it after.
Yeah.
I hear these stories, and I think if we had a waiting period, that would really help some of that.
And again, it's really just to get people to not wait until they need it and then get a subscription.
Right.
The subscription's designed for it always being in place whether you need it or not, just like insurance.
Right. And that's absolutely happening.
Yeah. And nobody gets hail insurance on their roof the morning of the storm. Yeah.
And that's what we've done for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
It was designed for like everybody to buy. So you have, large pool, that type of thing. Of course, that didn't happen. So now it is, voluntary, participation in it. The subsidies, people will say, well, the subsidies have helped more people be insured. And that, while that's good, still it's 1/3 of our population in Oklahoma is on subsidized healthcare. This is an $800 billion spend nationally, roughly. And it's out of 1.8 trillion of annual deficit. So it's a big part of our budgetary issues, and I think needs to be worked on. The cost itself need to be worked on. Trump Care included some of that to deal with pharmaceutical cost. And so some of the ideas that he had there, I think, were good. I think Trump Care was based on the philosophy of people need to be thinking that they should pay for their health care. Like, I'm gonna pay for the health care, not somebody else is going to pay for health care. Health care is free, but give the money to the individual, let them buy the health care. They'll make better decisions than if they see the dollars and how much things cost than they would if it's just somebody else bills, like the insurance company bills the government direct. So I think that's a good philosophy. It's a good start. But again, there's a big discussion, and it's not an easy thing to solve, and it's not something you can solve quickly, but we need to get there.
Eddie, what we're seeing here is the mind of a businessman. Kevin Hearn shares the same skill set. He understands business and structuring. That's why McDonald's put him in leadership.
Right.
And I think we've seen, in fact, he put together a budget blueprint for 10 years to get us out of deficit spending, to balance the budget. Mm-hmm. And his colleagues said they've never seen a better product. But that's what happens when you bring a businessman who understands the numbers. And it's my hope that we can see that same kind of expertise coming out of CD1 here, the Tulsa's congressman.
You look at what I worked on at the state level, when it was, business related issues. It would be from insurance to business development to workforce, those type of things. And so it will continue at the federal level. Note that if you look at Trump's America First agenda, it's heavily economic driven. A lot of the issues are economic. I think he's right about reindustrializing. Economic power is security. We cannot let our manufacturing base leave. I think he's right to say, let's bring those jobs back. You have Obama, who didn't even think they could come back, that it was even possible. I think it is. I think it's going to take time. And in some cases be painful, like with the tariffs and that type of thing. The tariffs, Trump has been criticized about the tariffs. But if you talk to manufacturers, they're like, these other countries were absolutely taking advantage of us. We can't compete with the way the current laws are. And this is not just China. This is Mexico. This is Canada, and so, so it's a real thing. And yes, it's painful and a process and it takes time, but I think it needs to happen. Sure.
Hey, Mark, one issue that's really prominent right now in Congress is the whole birthright citizenship. What is your position on that?
Yeah, so the reason it's a topic is because people have abused it, is the issue. I think that our founding fathers intended those that were born here to be citizens. And so my first instinct would be to, preserve their intent. But saying that is, how can we put guardrails around it to make sure that it's not being abused? And so do you do away with it altogether, or do you come up with some other mechanisms to put those guardrails in place? My approach would be more, let's see if we can put some guardrails in place and try to preserve what the founders intended. So that would be kind of my initial approach, to maybe not throw the baby out with the bathwater on some of that. But I do recognize that it has been abused, and we do need to look at it.
Yeah, because I'm an immigrant, Germany, and so my mother and we had to become naturalized, and we had to live here for I think 7 years at the time. I was 11 when it happened, and I'm 11 years old, and they've got me standing there, swearing in and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and all. Mm-hmm. But it's just there was a congressman from Arizona about 20 years ago now who was really trying to push getting rid of that birthright citizenship. And basically, he says that the 15th Amendment, is it 15th or 16th? I'm sorry. I think it's 14th. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I knew I'd get there eventually. Mm-hmm. I was going the wrong way. The 14th Amendment, that when it talks about it, that's been misinterpreted or expanded. Mm-hmm. And I don't have it in front of me right now, and we'll probably get into it later. But it's pretty clear that that amendment, which is the one we use to allow it, has been taken away. That was specifically intended for free slaves. Oh yeah, those born and under the jurisdiction of the mm-hmm. United States. So the problem is when you have visitors coming, or illegal visitors, let's call them, and they're not really under the jurisdiction. They're still citizens of another country. And I had 2 of our kids born in Holland, and we're never able to become Dutch citizens, because you had to have one parent. The rule in 99% of the countries on earth is that you have to be born and have a parent that's and so we failed in that. I don't know if we'd have done it or not, but at least and
I think that we do need to. Citizenship is something that's very special, and we need to treat it as special, and mm-hmm. we need to make distinction between those who are citizens and non-citizens. There should be a difference. Citizens should have rights that are not available to non-citizens. That's just part of the deal everywhere in the world. So again, with the guardrails, you're right that other countries have guardrails. We need our citizens to love this country, to, be committed and loyal to the country and that type of thing. So it is a problem when, people are here and not maybe really, that supportive of who we are as a country, that type of thing. So yeah, I'm open to whatever guardrails we would need to get done on that.
I got a question. The McGirt ruling affects this side of Oklahoma, right, significantly. The courts of jurisdiction for criminal punishment is different depending on what your ethnicity is here. Yet the 14th Amendment, Eddie mentioned, said that there must be equal protection of rights And if I get punished by one set of laws, but my Muskogee or Cherokee friend here has a different set of laws and different set of sentencing guidelines, then we don't have equal protection. Mm-hmm. Where do you come down on the whole McGirt issue?
Right. So, the tribes themselves, and they look at themselves as sovereign countries. So like we'd be working with some, like when we're talking with them as a state, we're communicating with a country like Mexico or Jamaica. That's how they see themselves. And yes. And it only applies to McGirt, only applies to criminal. I think there is an issue of how are Oklahoma citizens protected. I think there's definitely a question there. And also, the tribal members are also Oklahoma citizens and U.S. citizens. Mm-hmm. And so how does that play out? I think that what the tribes want to do is negotiate, compacts to resolve these things. They feel like that preserves their sovereignty. At the state level, my opinion is the courts have dealt us a bad hand. That the McGirt ruling does not give the state a lot of power, and so I think that is an issue. And so my approach would be, hey, let's sit down and negotiate, with the tribes, and that in today's environment is the best way to go forward, the most practical way to get these things worked out as much as you can. And so I'm hoping that the next governor's relationship with the tribes will be better, and we'll get some of those issues resolved. Yeah. And you've talked with the tribes. I think they do want to sit down and resolve the issues, Yeah. I think, there is a push you hear of expanding McGirt to things other than criminal. I think that's a problem. I think if, we're talking about, paying state taxes, income taxes and stuff like that, we have to, I don't think McGirt applies to that, so that's kind of my take on that. But
I ran into you Wednesday at the Capitol. You were about to file for office with Paul Ziriax, the state election board secretary. Well, then I went upstairs and ran into former Senator Rick Brinkley. Had a talk with him about this very issue. Rick was convicted of embezzlement, $1.8 million, but prosecuted in federal courts. He got less than 3 years sentence. Now, the Tulsa County Election Board secretary, way back in the 80s, Harmon Moore, $12,000 he embezzled or was convicted of. 7 years, double the sentence for 1/1000th the crime. That's the injustice between the state and the federal guidelines. And right now you're in the House. I'd like to see some kind of coming together so at least we have one set of books and one set of sentencing guidelines, because then we'll have equal justice. That's where I'm at on it.
Yeah. I heard Congressman Hearn talk about this a little bit, and, said that, the feds could deal with this. He seemed to feel his comment was that there wasn't maybe the political mood to do so at the federal level. So I'll have to see what's going on when I get up there. I don't know what the sentiment, I'm not familiar with what the sentiment is up there, but, I think that tribe sovereignty issues need to be, they're very serious about that, and we need to respect, that with them. But then also we have the state of Oklahoma has its needs as well. I live in the eastern part of the state. I live in what is, the Creek area, Creek Reservation area. So,
Muskogee now they call themselves.
That's correct. Yes. That's correct. And so, but, I'm concerned about my rights or as an Oklahoman are protected, that type of thing. And we need to balance that out. From right now, what that means is sitting down and negotiating a workable deal between both parties.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. It's funny when you get to the 14th, 15th, 16th Amendment, they essentially deal with race. there's some other things in there, but it's just funny that Abraham Lincoln, who basically led to all of this, that he's the one that said, quoting from the Bible, from Scripture, a nation divided against itself cannot long may not long endure. And I see that happening on the tribes, and they want to be in America, but not of it. And then you got Black Americans that want to be in America, but not of it, and want special rights and special this and this and this. And I my personal feeling is that until we all become one,
Americans,
exactly, it's becoming more and more balkanized. The Somalis up in Minnesota, Mexican and Central Americans and South Americans in the Southwest or in Chicago or in Atlanta. And we're becoming more and more and more balkanized, whereas instead of a melting pot, we're becoming a smelting pot where we're actually now separating instead of uniting.
And I think what we have in America is special. I believe in American exceptionalism, and, we need to celebrate that. I'm very bothered at people that want to only criticize the country and not recognize and celebrate what we have done well. I was at a meeting one time, and an educator was talking about, ask a group of students, what did they know about George Washington? And the only thing he got back from them was that he owned slaves. So, I understand telling the whole story and telling it, you don't want to whitewash things or gloss over, issues, but you don't want to just focus on the negative either. We've done as a country a lot of great things, and we need to celebrate that and to unify the country again. We're very divided as a country. Everybody senses that and feels that. It'd be nice to be able to come together and unite a little more.
What are your goals this campaign? Now, you've got 2.5 months, right?
Right.
To make your case to get the Republican nomination.
Yes, right.
And may go to runoff. 12 people are in this one
right
now. And
I think that in running, to be pragmatic, you have to feel like that it's probably going to a runoff. You have to, I think, plan for that. You'd like to win it outright, but you need to plan for a runoff. So I think it's going to be expensive. We're planning. We've reached our filing day fundraising goal of $750,000. That's on hand. That's ready to be spent, and we're going to try to fundraise. That goal was to have $1 million raised and spent in the primary. And so then beyond that, to try to get another $1 million for the runoff, and then another $1 million for the general. So I feel like it's going to be a $3 million race. I think that's about, the last time this happened. And when Kevin Hearn won, there was not as 12, but there was 5 or 6, and it ended up being a very expensive race. The nature of it, there will big players get involved? Will, big national PACs get involved? We'll see. I don't, to me, as a safe Republican district in a contested primary, I don't see why national Republican money would involve itself, or the president would involve himself in the primary race. So that's our approach is that we're going to have to raise our own money, and we're going to have to assume that no one's going to get the Trump endorsement and go. And I went to DC this last Monday, had these exact conversations with Trump staff and the NRCC. And that's what I got feedback from them is it's very, very unlikely that Trump will get involved in the primary. There's really no political advantage for him to do so. Almost everybody in this race on the Republican side will be supportive of America First and the president. I doubt there'll be a number of people that are not. So I don't think there's any advantage of it. But so we're plowing forward, assuming that we're going to have to work hard and we're going to have to raise our own money and, to get this deal done.
I noticed I haven't heard anything negative. You're not attacking the other candidates in this. It just doesn't seem to be your style.
There are too many to attack.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean,
well, there are a couple of well-funded opponents.
Right,
yeah.
right.
There's a couple that will be able to fundraise, and we'll have, it's not really my style. I'd rather talk about to go on the attack. I'd rather talk about myself. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes you can get contrast just by talking about who you are.
Yeah. I helped Eddie a couple of years ago with his campaign for city council. One of the things you notice is there's likely more PAC money, independent expenditures being spent than the campaign war chest, because you have significant limits on campaign donations. But PACs can dump as much as they want.
Right.
So you're going to see a lot of PAC money. Maybe, one opponent, they wouldn't to your face attack you, but one of their backers will come after you.
Right.
And so people are going to get a sense of things that might not be truly from the campaign. And there'll be PACs supporting you that are going to have some, educating about the opponent and where their weakness. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there will be some PAC involvement, definitely. Mm-hmm. And so there will be some independent expenditure spent. I don't feel like I have a lot that opens myself up for criticism. I mean, I'll have some, there's only 2 candidates that have a voting record. And so invariably, people will scour through the voting record and try to find something to criticize. I don't feel like I have really any skeletons in my closet, but I have been in business for 33 years, and you don't make everybody happy.
That's true.
So
I was going to get to that years ago. I started as a farmer's agent, and I realized that for me to attack the other company does not make my product any better.
Right.
What you're trying to sell is your product. And show why yours is the best product for them.
Right. You do want to show contrast.
Right.
So this is what you get, and but that's not negative, And so, and the other thing too is there's so many people in this race that I don't feel like I need to go negative, because I feel like somebody else probably will anyway.
What?
And
the political side of me is saying in the runoff, though, when there's just 2, that's when we're likely to see that part.
Maybe. And, for myself, I'm comfortable with my voting record in the House. So what's interesting is, talking about that a little bit, is there's some indexes I didn't score very well on. Mm-hmm. Freedom Index 67. There's a state GOP poll that I scored very low. But if you look at those, most of the Republican, like in the state GOP, most of the Republicans scored very, very low. Only a few scored high. The Freedom Index, a lot of the Republican caucus in the House scored very low. Mm-hmm. So I think if you look at what they're scoring and say, okay, Freedom Index, what bills are they scoring? Yeah, you kind of see the deal. So like, I like business development. I like, projects that have ROI. I think that when you're doing business development, you need to make sure there's guardrails and you're getting a good
ROI?
Return on investment.
Oh, okay.
So if we invest in infrastructure for like a business that's coming in for manufacturing, normally the money spent on that infrastructure is going to still be there, even if the company, doesn't make it or whatever. But also they'll return in taxes and other things much greater than the amount of the infrastructure put in, right? Or they spend on the infrastructure. And so again, make good deals for yourself, have guardrails, make sure you're getting a good return on investment. There are some people that look at that as growing government. And so that's not my style on it. I think these are great projects. Some of the places these are going in, they don't have really wages. They don't have labor out there. And so
some of it though looks like corporate welfare.
Right.
Or, you don't do it for the mom and pops who grew up here under you. Like your dad started a business group. I don't think your dad got those sweet perks to move his operation here. And
that's a very good comment. And that's one I hear too. So now a lot of the projects that we've seen have been Trump priority projects. So what happens, like the smelter is a national security strategic initiative.
Great.
So
point.
it's like, okay, our aluminum production has gone from 5 million tons a year to 800,000. Aluminum is critical for military and aviation.
Mm-hmm.
And so Trump negotiated the deal with ESA, which is a Saudi company,
Mm-hmm.
and brought them over. And I get it. There's people that don't like it, that it's Saudis. They don't like the whole idea of the project, but it's a national security issue.
Yep.
And so that's part of, if we're serious about reindustrializing, we're going to have to get these type of projects. Now, the state's part of that, out of a $6 billion investment, is $245 million of infrastructure. And so my belief on the project was that the state would get a return of greater than 245 on that. So I don't believe it's growing government, but on this competitive issue, I am sensitive to that. One of the problems I'm hearing is the existing manufacturers say, there's no labor. What are we going to do for labor? These companies come in and steal labor from us potentially. So there is a concern there that I think we need to watch out for.
Yeah, hold on. You glossed over something I think needs to be explained. Infrastructure. In other words, you're saying the state isn't building their factory for them, but we're going to have roads that the semis can go down.
Yeah.
Tall things,
Could be roads, utility lines, sewer lines. Yep.
That's public infrastructure.
Right.
Doesn't matter who's there. You just want somebody there making something productive.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, but I am sensitive to the fact of the corporate welfare. I mean, my take on that is that corporate welfare looks like, bailing someone out with the loan or giving them direct payments without any guardrails and that type of thing. Picking winners is a problem.
That is, yeah.
So I am sensitive to those type of things. But when you get, like, again, strategic initiative, something that's a strategic initiative that is not going to happen naturally anyway. I mean, that's the whole thing, is there's picking winners. There's like 1 or 2 smelters in the whole country. We're importing this aluminum now.
Yep.
And so there's not really a picking winner issue. It's we don't have the capacity to make it. And so there we go. I know some of the projects we had when I first got in, electric cars was a big deal. There was federal subsidies for those, and every state's trying to get their piece of that pie and that type of thing. I mean, my take on that would be, I'm not a big fan of the subsidies that were going to the green energy.
Yes.
Green energy should win on its own. We don't want to subsidize it. I like energy diversity, but we shouldn't be picking winners. And I think if you looked at, green energy is typically a little more costly. It's not as reliable. You don't really want to be, when the winter storm comes, you want to be sure you have some reliable power sources and not only wind turbines and that type of thing.
Yeah, the ice up and can't turn. By the way, did the state quit subsidy? They were paying like $40,000 per turn.
Yeah, the state stopped. Yeah.
The Democrats stood in the way of that. They wanted those subsidies to remain.
That was before I got in there,
yes,
but I think that's probably a fair statement.
Yeah.
So what, bringing it back down to the state, what pieces of state legislation have you been involved in that you feel proud of or to share about?
Right. So some of the top things that I felt like are my accomplishments there, a lot of insurance work. So I passed the Strengthen Our Homes project, Strengthen Our Homes bill, which created a fortified roof program in the state. So nationally, the discussion on how do we get insurance costs down? 3 things. It's resiliency, mitigation, and tort reform. These are the tools that we have to get costs down.
Cost of construction.
Well, that's difficult to get through law.
It is.
How do you
regulation?
I don't believe you can regulate yourself to lower cost of materials or cost of insurance. I'm glad you brought that up. Regulation is is not a good tool to lower costs.
Yeah, it'll bite you too.
The states that have tried to do that have wrecked their market. And the great example is California. We're not going to let you raise rates on our policyholders, and the companies left. And so the idea is that insurance is, as Eddie, you know very well, it's about capital. You have companies bringing their capital to the state and letting us use that to pay back to pay us when we have natural disasters, right? And so the idea is to say you're going to expose your capital to a potential loss that's why would they do that? Their only remedy would be to leave the state. And so that's what you see in California. Florida had a problem, with it as well. So I think that we're looking at regulation this year to kind of slow down the pace, kind of changing the way that we do rate filing here in the state. But I think you have to be very careful of giving the insurance commissioner too much power to regulate rates or pushing the commissioner to regulate rates too much, because the companies can take their ball and go home, as we've seen them do.
In health insurance, that's happened.
Right, exactly. So that's why the discussion to lower costs. And when people were filing these bills, I'm like, what in this rate regulation bill will lower cost? Sure, it's a pass through. The pricing is a function of the underlying cost of the commodity. And so you have to make the claim cost less to get the premiums down.
Remember what happened? Hurricane Katrina hit, and then they just hurried up and brought in a bunch of drywall from China that was toxic, and that created even more problems. Yep. And that's where, if you get too lax in regulation, you end up with people dying.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the role of the insurance commissioner is to make sure companies are solvent.
Yeah.
Not really to regulate rates. We don't even think about people saying, "Oh, who's regulating the cost of shingles or lumber?" Or but it's right now our system of premium pricing, it lets the free market determine it. It's not set by the commissioner. I think that's good. I think that's a Republican thing to do. It's a free market Republican approach. So I do want us to be careful at changing that. But then there's demand for, hey, what are we doing to deal with costs? And that's why the Strength in Our Homes program was to encourage homeowners and builders to put weather-resistant materials on their homes, okay, and weather and superior processes to mitigate the claims when it happens. It is a credit so what happens is someone's going to rebuild their roof. It's a $40,000 roof. Well, to make it, a fortified roof, maybe an additional like $5,000 to $8,000. So there's a credit given to the person already spending the money on rebuilding the roof to improve the quality of the roof.
A government credit or an insurance discount?
No, it will. There is discounts that the companies give for it, but there's a government credit out of the insurance department, and the idea is it's a incentive program to build awareness of we need to be using these more weather-resistant materials. Alabama's the state that had a lot of success over time. It's built a culture of demand for weather-resistant materials. The problem now is there's no incentive. I mean, we could go and just demand, change the ordinances and say, okay, you have to build with these materials. That's very heavy-handed. I don't think it's very popular. I don't think your mayors and local areas would want to do that. So that's why it's this incentive program. It's capped on how much it can be spent in it, and it's funded by premium tax. So you think about it like as the pricing of insurance has gone up, the tax collected on the premium tax has also gone up, and it's a return back to. Yeah. So anyway, it's not an appropriated program for that.
Yeah, I like the idea of, because it's going to save the insurance company money, they give the credit to the guy paying the premium, not some single mom who lives up in Idaho paying for a roof in Alabama.
Right.
That's the problem I have. Now, here's where I'm getting at, though. You go to Congress. Now you've got real hideous EPA regulations. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is being scaled back under Trump's team.
I think that's good. And I think part of bringing the business back is recognizing we're going to have to unwind some of these onerous regulations that prevent companies from operating here, that type of thing. So,
Mark, let me ask you, what do you think the single biggest problem is with Oklahoma staying at between the 48th and 50th in education?
Right. That's a good question. That's a very hot topic at the Capitol right now. Two things, early literacy and number of instructional days is what we're working on. So you probably know about the Mississippi Miracle. It used to be that, people would say, thank God for Mississippi, because they were always last in education, and we knew we weren't going to be last because Mississippi was always last. Well, they got serious with early literacy maybe about 15 years ago, and they put $80 million in literacy coaches, training teachers how to teach reading, and then a third grade retention program where if the student at third grade doesn't read at third grade, they stay again in third grade until they can. Right. Now, the idea is between kindergarten to third grade, you learn to read, and then after that, you read to learn. So this is why early literacy is kind of the magic bullet, so to speak. So, coincidentally, Oklahoma tried this years ago, around the same time Mississippi did. We didn't put the money in, and I think part of the problem was we were having budget shortfalls at the time, so it was a very difficult time to do this, to put money in, and then we kind of gave up on the retention.
We had the wrong team over there at the education department.
Yeah,
too, when you say
right, and I think too, like the idea on third grade retention, that's a really hard pill to swallow for the parents to retain. So you want to be sure it's not like the school, we're not going to test anything or check anything until they're third grade, and then we're going to whack the student of retaining. We need to be, when they're in first and second grade, checking their progress. So like if they're falling behind in first and second grade, that we're ringing the bell so that there's not a big surprise, when it gets to the third grade. So that's the number one thing. And the second thing is our number of instructional days. We have some of the lowest instructional days of any state. And and like 150, because some states are like 170, right? Yeah. And so it's a bad look when you're very low in education and you have the lowest instructional days. That doesn't look very good. Yeah. Now, I think what's happening is in a demand for teachers that the number of instructional days was used as a recruiting device by the district. So say, hey, come over to us. We have less instructional days, and the virtual classroom was also a device used for recruiting. Hey, you can work from your home virtually, and you don't have to come in, or 4-day work week. So there were some things that the school districts were using to recruit, which I understand the need, but we need to review the impact to the students and learning for these techniques. And I think that the instructional days needed to go up. Now, the other issue is my comments to the appropriations team at the House was, we can't do this and not increase the spend. Otherwise it's an unfunded mandate in a way. Now, there's a note that when we lowered the instructional days or allowed them to be lower, we didn't necessarily, take back money at the time. So, but I think that's you saw the budget just came out. We are doing a $2,000 a year spend. It's about $80 million spend. I feel good that we're doing that. But I think there needs to be extra money that goes with it. It goes good if you do both at the same time. Yeah,
because when we were there Wednesday, the conclave met, the white smoke went up. We have a budget. Yeah. And to address something like what Mississippi was successful at, what did you see in that budget that says, okay, we can make this happen?
Right. So they did commit the spend in excess of $80 million for the literacy coaches. So they're funding it, which is good. Yeah. And so I feel like if you just put the retention in without the funding, without the literacy coaches, you're going to tee people up for failure. You're going to have a lot of students not making the cut and have to retain. It's going to be ugly. And so the goal was to get a high percentage, passing on out of third grade. And that's what the importance of the literacy coaches are. I think the education community understands it too. And they were like, look, if we can get the funding, if we can get the help, then we're supportive of it. There was concern of the education community, but I think it was general support. I think they understand too that we need to get our academic performance.
Well, we're giving them help.
Yeah, and then we're giving them help.
My issue is this. Okay, I understand totally what we're trying to do, but my question is, why do we need to do that? In other words, all three of us went to school.
There were 38 kids in my kindergarten class.
There were no literacy coaches.
Yeah, one teacher.
Yet somehow, miraculously, I learned to read. And so now, oh no, they have to have literacy codes. They have to have this. They have to have, all of these new, what would you call it, gimmicks, kind of in a way, and an $80 million gimmick in this. I hate to use the word gimmick, but this is supposed to be the panacea for this whole deal to take care of everything, Whereas I think the real problem is our university educational system training teachers. And a lot of it as well is, and we've talked about this many times on this show, there's too much focus on the teacher's needs versus the kids' needs. Sure. So we've reversed it.
Point well taken. Yep.
We're more concerned about our teachers being taken care of than we are about our kids being taken care of. Because if our kids are being taken care of, nobody worries about taking care of the teachers. I much more quickly want to give teachers raises when we know the teachers are doing a good job.
Right.
But if you're just looking for a job and you want to be paid $50,000 a year to show up from 8 to 3 in the afternoon, and you really don't care about the kids, you're not doing a good job.
Right.
It's like we're afraid of, and of course it's the teachers unions that have a lot to do with this. They control so much, too much, and instead of saying, if you don't teach, if your classrooms are below, let's say all three of us are teachers, okay, and you two, your kids are passing on, they're doing great on their exams, and all, but mine are not, there's obviously a problem.
Right.
So it's not a mystery. It's not like all of a sudden, I wonder why his kids are not. It's because I'm a horrible teacher.
Is there merit pay in this formula for education?
That just came out on the portal. I don't know. I need to look into it. I don't think so. I think it's just a 2,000 across the board. I mean, the point's well taken. So what levers can the legislature throw? Funding is kind of one of them. But when we meet with teachers, they will get a lot of things that are non-financial in there. We don't get the support from the administration. Their security in the classroom. We don't, kids act up, we can't kick them out. There's also comments about, support from the families. There's comment on poverty. It was interesting. I had an interesting conversation with former Tulsa Public Superintendent Deborah Giss, and so she's like, "Well, we have so much poverty," and so I was like, "Well, how does that play out? Are you seeing poverty impact the classroom?" I said, "Well, a single mother can't get their student to school, a lot of absenteeism." I said, "Okay, is that poverty or is that breakdown of the family?"
Yeah.
No, it's poverty.
Yeah, sure.
But I think the thinking there is, well, if the mother makes enough, then they can have other people helping her and can pay other people to help, and they don't have that. But I think the breakdown of the family is in there too. I think that the teachers don't get. There's a lot of learning and that happens at home. The Oklahoma Constitution says it's the parents' obligation and right to raise. Sure. So we need to have parents taking that seriously too, and supporting the school and helping that learn. A lot of homework is many times a partnership with the parents and the student, to work through it, make sure that it gets done, the discipline. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved. The legislature has its role that it needs to do. The school administration, the education community has its role that it needs to do, and the parents do too. And so I think you're right. I think that that teachers unions at times are too focused on teacher pay and to focus on non-student issues, and then here we have our kids that are struggling, and we've got to change that up. We're failing them. I mean, right now, a third of our graduates don't seek either a college degree or a meaningful work certificate, like tech school. I think 1/3 go to college, 1/3 go to tech school, 1/3 go to neither. And so, one of my big reasons to work on education policy was that of how it impacts the economy and workforce. And so, I worked on I ran a living wage interim study to talk about the vagaries of living wage laws. And the comment I made, and from looking at some of the data, is skilled labor easily finds a job and easily makes living wage. It's not even a question. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, the manufacturers are begging for more labor. Mm-hmm. That's skilled labor, right? Mm-hmm. And so unskilled labor struggles at finding a job, struggles at making living wage. And if you change that up where you demand a living wage, then they'll actually struggle more in finding jobs because they can't command the wage because they don't have any skills. How do they build the skills? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's my biggest concern on our educational system. If we're graduating a third of our students and they don't have a career pathway, they're not seeking tech, fine, you don't want to go to college, that's fine. We need more trade skills. And so I think that's part of the problem.
Mark, this in the last week and a half, I got a card in the mail. I get Christmas cards, not often, cards explaining the sacrificial work of Jesus Christ and what Easter means. And I got that card from you. Mm-hmm. Explain to me what motivated you and how your Christian faith, directs you.
Right. Good question. Thank you for that. So the Easter card, I said earlier, it wasn't my original idea, but, in talking about, what to do around Easter, somebody said, why don't we have a campaign to encourage people to go to church on Easter and celebrate Easter? And I thought that's such a great idea. I mean, that, some people only go to church on Easter or Christmas, and I think encouraging them, that people say, yeah, I need to be in church for Easter. I think that's the most important time. The fundamental thing about the Christian faith is the resurrection. And so that's the key point. And so that's the key celebration. So, people need to be in church on Easter. So as far as, my personal faith, my background is I was born again at a very young age of 7 from my parents, grew up in a Christian home. And so we all went to church regularly. I maintained that through college, independently. I went to church.
No small feat, because college tries to undermine that.
A lot of college students stop going to church independently on their own when they go to college, without the family, pattern of the family going, without that reinforcement. Sometimes they don't, but I did. But when I turned after my dad passed away in 2004, very impactful thing for me. And I went on a little bit of soul searching kind of at that time. And so that soul searching time directed me kind of to go back and get a degree in Christian apologetics. And the idea was just to deepen my faith, to learn more about my faith. I was introduced to the subject through the writings of C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm. And, I had someone encourage me. I had a pastor encourage me to say, hey, don't ever listen to music in your car. You need to listen to something that does you some good, And so okay. And so, I started getting some audiobooks for C.S. Lewis. And Mere Christianity and The Problem of Pain were very impactful to me. Mm-hmm. I probably listened to those a dozen times over, almost could quote it, so I just, as deepening my search into that, I saw, hey, there's this modular programs to go get a master's in Christian apologetics. And so I enrolled in Biola University 2009, and graduated with a master's in 2013. Kind of like, what are you going to do with people? So what are you going to do with that? are you going to the ministry? And I really didn't feel called in the ministry with that. Part of apologetics is applying Christianity to the world, applying it to your life, and some of that is, a theology of work. What is it? That God created us to work, and it's part of, our purpose. And in fact, I believe in an expression of worship and praise back to God, to use the gifts that He's given us in a productive way to build society. And so I got out of that. Okay, well, I don't really want to go in the full-time ministry. So what is it? And so I think having that degree and the thinking, and Eddie knows, he's had many sessions with me where I've kind of, gone on, riffed about kind of my beliefs on some kind of maybe sometimes esoteric subjects or, heavy philosophical type issues. And I think this is what part of what made me decide to get into politics, is that I feel like I could use some of those skills, both the balance of business skills and where you build like speaking skills, negotiation skills, understanding of business, how to manage people, and then also with the theological and philosophical background of the Christian apologetics. I felt like it was a good combination and one that would be useful and be good. And I think it has been.
So you started a Bible study. Yeah. Eddie started going, well, in my mind, that's more pure ministry than if you're getting cut a paycheck for it.
Right. No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And, at that time, I think when we were meeting, it was, I think, probably part of the time when I was either going through that journey or actually in the program. And so I wanted to find kind of natural ways to talk about what
you need an outlet.
Yeah, I needed an outlet to, hey, here's what we talked about. Here's what I read this last week. And so I think it's kind of natural. Those were fun times.
Yeah.
At the first Panera church.
Yeah, that's right. Where we break bread, Panera bread.
Well, what's interesting too is that my personality and style is not very explicitly Christian. It's deep down. It's embedded in what I think and do, but it's not very explicit. And I really believe if one of the impactful things in the Bible was Paul's message at the Areopagus to the Greeks. When Paul would go to teach at a synagogue, he would open the Torah and show that Jesus was Christ. Okay, explicitly using the Torah. When he goes to the Areopagus, he doesn't do that. No. He uses the tomb of the unknown God as a reference. He quotes two Greek poets.
Pedestal.
Yeah,
to the unknown God.
Yeah, the two. Yeah, right. Yes, two.
Socrates actually sculpted that, by the way.
Okay, good. Yeah. And he quoted two Greek poets. He used general revelation, the world around us, and that type of thing. Now, he didn't capitulate in his message. He knew the Greeks didn't like resurrection. He still mentioned the resurrection, which kind of ended the discussion at the time. And then later he wrote 1 Corinthians 15 to Greeks, a Greek audience, making an apologetic, if you will, for the resurrection. So, but for me, it's like, I think that in public, I'm more likely to, say things like, I've debated on topics like gender identity, abortion, DEI, these type of things. And you'll find me making statements like, we don't need the Bible to tell us we shouldn't kill our children.
Yeah.
Because what happens, I feel like, in the public square is that people want to use that as you're just pushing your religion on me to marginalize the argument. And I feel like that we need to get to the core of it. What's, again, the general revelation. I don't need a specific Bible quoted to know we don't kill our children, and I feel like it leaves them with very little room and space it takes away that tool they would have otherwise used, and so that's how you'll see me work. Sometimes that comes across maybe as I'm not as, conservative, or I'm not as, that type of thing. And it's not true. It's a just style that I have to use. You'll find me in a lot of my debates on the floor are on these far right culture issues, taking this line. And so, but that just again, and it's influenced by Paul's work on the area.
One of my professors at Bible college said it well. I don't care how high you can jump. I want to know how straight can you walk.
Right.
And I think you're about walking straight.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. The Reverend Representative Mark Tedford.
At the Holy Church of Panera Bread, where we have Bible study every week.
Yeah. So,
except when we're in session, right?
Yeah.
Mark, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to come by here, and always good luck. And I'll support you however we can, and we hope we get enough others to see a new representative. By the way, do you have a job for me up there? No, I would not move to D.C.
Well, he'll handle all your Medicare customers.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah,
that's it.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll go in here and sign the agreement.
And he's the new owner of Tedford Agency.
The great head. No, I don't need that. No, I don't need that headache.
I'm teasing.
No, hey, Mark, thank you again so much for coming in. And good luck and God bless, okay?
After the break, we have Jamie Fowler talking the school board elections.
There we go.